My involvement in this has a very simple beginning, because it was in 2012 that I listened to a young woman speaking to a group of bishops about being trafficked into prostitution. She was an English woman, and she had been trafficked from England into Italy. And that began to break down the image in my mind that human trafficking was a problem somewhere else. It was a problem at a distance from where I lived, but that is not so. And we've already heard how this country, Myanmar, in the words of Cardinal Nichols, is scarred by the reality of human trafficking and how it spreads across this part of the world in a very dramatic way, as well as being in almost every other part of the world too. The second step for me was in 2012, when the Olympic Games came to London, and we began to see in London a remarkable partnership between the Metropolitan Police and some of the religious sisters living and working in London. And they worked together, but only after some obstacles, some lack of trust was overcome by the promises that they made to each other. The police not to prosecute the victims of trafficking, and the sisters not to hide those whom they had rescued, because that inhibited the attempt to bring prosecutions against the traffickers. And that experience in London in 2012 led to the first meeting of the Santa Marta Group in 2014 in Rome, in which bishops and the senior leaders of the forces of law and order from 24 different countries met in the Vatican. And it was on that occasion that these heads of police forces signed a declaration committing themselves to cooperative work against human trafficking. And I remember as we arranged ourselves for the inevitable photograph, I was standing next to Pope Francis, and he turned to me with his elbow and he said, "This meeting is far more use than most of the meetings I attend, so you keep it going." And that is simply what I tried to do in these years since 2014. I would like very briefly to highlight some of the things that through the Santa Marta work that we have learned. They're very simple, but maybe they could be a framework for the ongoing endeavours of this conference that will go forward to the Federation of Asian Bishops conferences. The first is very simple. In this work of countering human trafficking, everybody must give first place to the victims. There are many people who involve themselves in this work, and they come at it from different points of view. And I will mention some of those in a moment. But everybody has to keep at the center of their attention the person of the victim. It is for the dignity of each human being that we work. And that notion of dignity arises from the heart of our faith. each person made in the image and likeness of God. And secondly, we keep the victim at our heart, because the victim bears the image of Christ. Because we know by the will of God, the Word becomes flesh in the life of the poor, in the person of Jesus. And that tells us that in the unfolding of God's plan, there is a special place for those whose experience of life is one of poverty and deprivation. So for the dignity of each victim, and because they bear the likeness that Christ chose to take to himself, they remain center of our activity. The second lesson that Santa Marta learns is that the work against human trafficking must always be a work of partnerships. I remember the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police in London being interviewed on public television by an aggressive secular interviewer. And the interviewer said to the police chief, "Why on earth are you working with the Catholic Church?" And his answer I have never forgotten. He said, "Human trafficking is a worldwide network of evil. The Catholic Church is a worldwide network dedicated to good. If the Church can be my ally in the fight against crime, I embrace this opportunity warmly." So he pointed out the importance of partnerships, and partnerships which bring the different resources of people together, the resources of the Catholic Church, among whom in the first place are religious women especially. There are in London the Spanish order, the Adoratrices, who for 100 years have been working against human slavery. And we see right across the world, and we heard from Cardinal Bo in this country, the crucial role of religious women. It must be networks of organizations, and here particularly we have prominence for the organizations of Caritas. The partnerships must also embrace the fact that human trafficking is a crime, and therefore we must strive to form partnerships with those whose profession is to respond to crime. And first among those are forces of law and order, and second among those are the systems of courts and judiciaries. And Santa Marta tries to play its part in helping to build those partnerships too. Human trafficking, as we have heard, is a source of immense financial profit, and therefore we need partnerships with business and banking so that trafficking profits can be tracked, and so that the role of business, often unknown, of being used by traffickers to employ slaves is made open and brought into the light. And we need in this work partners who will provide funding for it. And therefore we need organizations like the Global Fund for the work against poverty. And I think there will be a representative from that Global Fund among us today. Focus on the victim. Always working in partnerships and trying to build partnerships. And then thirdly, recognizing the international character of this. And in these years of Santa Marta, we have been able to begin to construct centers of this work in different parts of the world. In Nigeria, especially in Edo State, but with the African Bishops' Conferences. in Lithuania, in Eastern Europe, in good partnership with police forces, in South America, based in Buenos Aires, under the leadership of the national police and the Argentinian government, and now here in Southeast Asia, in Yangon. And I thank you very much, especially Cardinal Bo and his leadership role in this, for what you are doing. Could I just end with maybe what is most deeply in my heart when I think of this work? Pope Francis said, we will not work together unless we learn again how to weep, unless we learn how to weep at the sight of the suffering of our brothers and sisters. And here is a quotation from a monk who has just been appointed as a new bishop in Oslo. I think his words are very telling. The Church, our faith, he writes, permits me to read my banal, sometimes squalid life into a narrative of redemption that reaches back not only to the beginnings of times, but also remembers forward into eternity. He said, as we hear with terrifying clarity the desolate cries of mankind, as we hear the rasping voice of evil, we can also hear the voice of Jesus saying, it is accomplished. For me, the figure of Adam sums up so much. Adam, made from the dust of the earth, reminds us that our lives, the lives of each one of us, are rooted in the dust and the messiness and the brokenness of our world. In fact, Adam, the name, comes from the Hebrew word Adamah, meaning the dust, the earth. But this dust is shaped by God's hand and has received the breath of God. And this dust is destined for glory. So each person, each one of us, made from the dust of the earth, but having received the breath of God, is destined for glory. And this is our drama. And this is the drama of every victim of human trafficking whom we meet. It is our task to restore that light, to restore that hope. It depends on the trust we can build between us. And I hope, I'm sure, that these days together will be strong in building that trust. And may God bless us in this work. And I thank you again from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much.